My name is Pat Gallivan. I'm the CRS coordinator, the Community Rating Systems coordinator for the town of Scituate. And the town of Scituate participates in the National Flood Insurance Program, and the community rating system is a required component of the national. Oh boy. And the community rating system is part of the National Flood Insurance Program. It's a required component. One of the benefits of participating in this program is that the town can take some steps that can result in lower flood insurance rates for residents living in the flood zones. The town has a CRS rating of 8, and this entitles residents in the flood zone to a 10% discount on their flood insurance. Information sessions such as this, where suggestions on how you can reduce your flood risk, help the town reach a category of 8. It appears that there are a number of people that are interested in insurance-related questions and in looking at the maps. This meeting is mostly about the community rating system and what the town can do to help you lower your rates. There's some general questions we could answer on flood insurance and a little bit about the mapping. With the town of Scituate and the town of Marshfield have filed an appeal of the FEMA maps, and that's in process right now. There's a 90-day period, so it may be that the maps you've looked at will be changed or may not be changed. But there may be people here who are just for insurance-related questions. It may be that your insurance agent would have the information specific to your home that would be useful. But several of the departments in Town Hall are represented tonight, as well as the Community Rating System Committee, who's been very involved and very helpful. These are residents from the town. There's also state officials. So we have Eric Carlson, who's working for the state and flood-related issues. We have Neil Duggan, who is the building inspector, and has answered a lot of questions about what people can do to their structures to improve their insurance flood rate. Jennifer Sullivan is the Board of Health person, the agent. Laura Harbottle is the town planner. And then we have the fire chief, Rick Judge. And then we have members of the Community Rating System Committee. And we have Rosemary, and we have Bill, and we have Doris, and we have Dave.
And Mike.
And Mike. And so I think, you know, we could ask any of the members at the table to give you a little something on what they do as far as their job is and what their responsibilities are. Then we'll take some questions. But again, there may be questions related to insurance that we really can't address tonight.
You want to go right down the road?
Okay.
Hello, I'm Eric Carlson. I work for the state, as Pat said, Department of Conservation and Recreation, DCR, Flood Hazard Management Program. My program is the state coordinating agency for the National Flood Insurance Program. We operate statewide. We have 3 people, but we're kind of spread thin, but we manage. Primarily in our role as a state coordinator, what we do is provide technical assistance on issues related to the National Flood Insurance Program. Primarily, we deal with community officials in communities that do participate in the program, but we're also available to provide assistance to pretty much anybody, design professionals or homeowners or insurance people, realtors, you name it, we'll provide assistance. And that's pretty much what we do. Thank you. Yep.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Neil Duggan, the building commissioner. I want to parrot what Pat said, and there was some, the Mariner reported last week that this was an insurance information format here. Last year for this meeting we had, I think, no more than 30 people. We're happy you all came out. Hopefully, you know, we can answer as many questions as possible. I'm the building commissioner of the town of Scituate. I'm also, my duty is to enforce FEMA regulations as adopted by the state building code. Since the new maps were issued back in May, we have averaged 20 to 25 people in the office. We have each one, we spend 10 or 15 minutes or however long it takes. We know how difficult this situation is on everybody, and I think we've had over 1,000 people through the office, and we're there in the office to answer your questions as best we can. So I think tonight, given the large number of people here, hopefully if there's one question, we really can't answer specific property questions, but if we get a general question, I think we can address it. It might take care of 20 or 30 questions. So hopefully, it'll go that way, and you won't walk out of here frustrated. But we're also saying, if need be, the town certainly can put together another meeting in a larger venue. Although this has a capacity of 300, it's unfortunate everybody can't be up front. Okay, so I'll hand it over to Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Sullivan from the Scituate Board of Health, your shelter manager. We have a whole table of emergency preparedness items back in the back room. If you haven't had one or haven't looked at what you need for a to-go bag or how to shelter in place, or you need a handy-dandy little reference card for your medicines or something of that nature, if you want to know what kind of important documents you should copy and have available, there's a lot of lists down there. If you lost a lot of food in the storms, there's things there on food safety, how to clean up after a flood, all those kinds of information. If you'll remember back to your experience earlier this year when we had these storms, think of ways you can improve what happened to you in case it happens again. Hopefully you'll find something worthwhile in this information that will help you. And the first thing is to be alert and informed. The second thing is to prepare. And the third thing may be to evacuate. And then the fourth thing is to go home and clean up. So none of that is necessarily fun, but it's part of living in a storm area. The other part of my job deals with septic systems. That doesn't affect everyone in this room because a lot of you are probably on sewer. But if you're in a high hazard area and you're on septic, there's a chance you're going to have to do what we call a modified storm Title V inspection after the storm, so we can see what's left of your system or what needs fixing. In some cases, some people have had their leaching areas totally wiped out and had to replace them. And that's just going to be a factor of living in the area that you're in. One of your alternatives at some point may be to go to a tight tank. But the other thing to remember is if you have an elevated house, the tank has to go up. So that's another problem and another cost. But we handle each one on an individual basis. We try to grant whatever variances are needed within reason. Sometimes I can approve them, sometimes it has to go to a board hearing, sometimes it has to go all the way to DEP and back after a board hearing. If you think you've got a problem, or you're sure you have a problem, don't waste time on Title V inspection, just put your money towards fixing the system. And after the storms, we try and handle everything as quickly as we can. If I'm dealing with a shelter, I have to get out of the shelter before I can go to assess the area and figure out who needs the inspections and who doesn't. But we try to be as helpful as we can. And November 4th, our many file cabinets that are in 3 different places are getting replaced, and we would ask for your patience and understanding while we get that whole area redone, and it's all going to be inside our office in a space less than where those file cabinets are now. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Laura Harbottle. I'm the town planner, and the reason that I'm here, I think, is that I administer the elevation grant program for the town. And this is kind of the opposite end from the things that Jennifer was just talking about. She was talking about mostly what happens during and after a storm. What this program is for is to prepare so that you're ready if a storm does come, your property is elevated and is not subject to as much storm damage. The money for this program comes from FEMA. It's an annual grant cycle. It only comes out once a year. It's federal money, so the town is really dependent on the federal government to vote the money and then to allocate it to Massachusetts, and then we have to apply for it. Most of the grants are for 75% of the cost of elevating. The cost can be anywhere from, maybe 60, 75,000 if you have a small house to upwards of 150, even higher than that if you have a larger house. So even the 25% is a substantial amount, but about 50 people have gone through this program and have elevated their houses using money from it. This year we had kind of a banner year. I think it was partly because people were really attuned to what was going on with the flood maps. But the other reason was that they started offering 100% reimbursement for houses that that FEMA considers severe repetitive losses. And these are houses that are, they're kind of clustered on Oceanside Drive and Turner Road for the most part, but there are some in Hummerock, there's some in the Glades, a few other locations that really get hit badly, that have had, many 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 losses. So those properties can get 100% of the cost of the elevation. That being said, FEMA has their own way of doing things, and they do look at these grants from what they call a cost-benefit point of view. They do a cost-benefit analysis on each property. Some properties make it, some properties, unfortunately don't, but we're trying to keep this grant program going, and I'm sure we will offer it again next year as long as Congress votes the money. And probably it will be offered around July with a deadline sometime in the fall. So if you want to elevate, you might think about getting the plans done and getting some estimates so that you're really ready to go forward, and then apply for the grants, when they become available. There is some material in the back on the table with Jennifer's material. It's some applications and also guidelines about how the program works.
Pat Gallivan again. In addition to CRS coordinator, I also work as the conservation agent in the town, and I work closely with Laura on elevation. I work with Neil on building permits, and with Jennifer on septic issues. So we try to coordinate these things. And after storms, sometimes there's emergency cleanups that are required. We would get involved in that and hopefully get you approved to do any of that type of work as quickly as possible.
Thanks, Pat. Pat's done a great job with all these issues, as has Laura and the fire chief and the building inspector, and I'm not sure whoever else is here from Town Hall, but I want to thank them for all their efforts. As Neil Duggan, the building inspector, said, there's been an awful lot of people that have passed through Town Hall very concerned about what's been happening with the flood insurance. I'm Dave Ball. I'm on the CRS committee, Community Rating System Committee. That's the committee that works to get these discounts for flood insurance. And right now, we are at 10%. So if you have a flood insurance policy, you are paying 10% less than you would be if we didn't have the CRS program in place. I can tell you right now that one of our goals is going to be to get this increase from 10 to at least 15%. Because obviously, we've got a major problem in this town with flood insurance premiums. And whatever we can do to reduce it a little bit will help. It's not going to help a whole lot, but a 10% or a 15% can make a difference. The other organization that I'm involved in is the Scituate Coastal Coalition. There are 10 beach associations in Scituate. Pretty much everybody in this room probably is living in an area that is covered by one of these beach associations. So the Scituate Coastal Coalition is made up of representatives from all 10 associations. And we have been meeting for the past 3 years, at least monthly, on various issues. Now, big focus now, of course, is on Bigot Waters and the flood insurance frankly, the mess that we're all facing right now, and that's what it is. It's a big mess and a big problem. I would suggest you take a look at the website. Somewhere in this room is our web person, Michelle Moran, who's done a great job with the website. All you have to do is go to ScituateCoastalCoalition.org, and you will find all kinds of information there, not only on Bigot Waters. You'll also find very easy way to get to the flood insurance maps. That's critical that you take a look and you know exactly where your property is and where it's going to be in the new mapping. If there's no change in the new mapping, you need to know that. We also have links to important weather sites, safety information, preparedness. So I would hope you all take a look at that. ScituateCoastalCoalition.org. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Doris Crary, and I live over on Oceanside Drive, and I've been active with the CRS program since it started in Scituate, and have helped to do the work that's required for the program. I really don't have a lot to say tonight, except that with the new Bigot Waters and the new maps, it's really important that you stay informed and you know what your own particular risk is, because there are many ways. I was at a flood seminar today where they were talking about the insurance rates and the differences that you can achieve by being, if you're 3 feet below, it was a $10,000 a year policy. If you're 3 feet above your base flood elevation, it was $533. So there are some huge differences out there that can help homeowners, and that's really something that's a very important function of, it wasn't our past prior duties, but I do look at it as something that going forward we need to focus more time on, and helping all of you to know what you could do that would maybe help solve some of those problems. And I know Neil is the one who's most informed in that area. He's blinking his eyes. But I think that's something that's really important. And just a couple of things. If any of you are here and you're in the new maps, you definitely want to take out what's known as a preferred risk policy. The max on it is less than $400. That would be for $250,000 plus $100,000 contents, and that would allow you to have coverage, and they will be grandfathered going forward. So when the new maps come into place, if they do, you would end up having 2 more years at that rate, and that's the plan right now from NFIP, and then they would gradually decrease, but it could buy you 7 or 8 years of lower premium rates, during which time hopefully other solutions will come about so that those rates really never take effect. So that is something that I want to mention to everybody. Any of you who are right now grandfathered or in a pre-firm structure and have those special rates, make sure you don't let your policy lapse. That is really critical. Should that policy lapse, you automatically get booted back in at the higher rate. And so that is a critical thing that you want to make sure that you do not allow that to happen to yourself. So I just passed that along at this moment. And Pat, I don't know whether you want to have...
Could you just repeat that again, please, the beginning? I'm writing down who we need to contact.
Oh, the preferred risk policy. And the preferred risk policy is available to people who are not mapped in the special flood hazard area at this time. So if on the new maps you're coming in and you're going to be required to have flood insurance, what it does is it gives you a policy that doesn't take into account your elevation. And they're going to be grandfathered in for the current year as well as for 2 years after the maps take effect. And you cannot buy it once the maps take effect.
How long do we have to get that?
Well, they said today, I mean, I was at an insurance seminar, they recommended the sooner the better, because the plan was originally that they were going to phase out this particular coverage. And I think when they found out what was happening to people who were in the pre-firm area like we are with so many houses before we even had these regulations, they decided that they needed to carry it on longer. So at this point in time, but I wouldn't wait. It's less than $500 a year. And if you don't want to take contents, if your house has never been flooded, just take it on the dwelling, and you can, they start at $129 and they go up to, it's a little under $500 if you have a basement, and that's for $250 on the house and $100,000 on contents. But we highly recommend that to all of you here. And any of you who have special rates and have special policies, let's say you've had it in your family for 20 years, you want to continue to make the payments on that and not to let it lapse. And I can tell you personally, I got a bill, and I knew I didn't owe this money, but I paid it anyway, and then I fought to get it back. And you really have to think of it that way. If you get unless it's an extraordinary one, you don't want to pay it if it's a $60,000 bill. But mine was only $700, bad enough. But I paid it, and I'm fighting to get my money back, and I'm sure I will get it back. But it's really important that you keep your policy right up. We're going into winter, and for those of you that have policies that are coming due right now, there are a bunch of regulations that are kicking in this fall, and those regulations for your flood insurance, as they kick in, they can make errors. And I ended up with 3 errors on my property. I got 3 different bills in a 90-day period, and I can't be, I'm sure, the only one. So if that happens, you really need to focus on it, correct it right away, and go forward from there. And anything we can do to help you, we obviously would. But I do say that to you, and I want you to know that because as of October 1, with the Bigger Waters Act, flood insurance at this point in time, if it's your second home, you're going to start to see your rates going up. If it's a business, you will see your rates going up. If you sell your home, those rates will immediately go to the new way that they're figuring, which is not without the pre-firm and without grandfathering. And there's a fourth one. Severe repetitive loss. Anybody who's a severe repetitive loss, you will automatically see your rates going up. And the other thing is, so that's a key thing to remember. If you see that RL on your policy, you're in the repetitive loss grouping. How far in you are, whether you're severe. I believe a severe repetitive loss is 4 losses of $5,000 each. Did I get it right? Yep, I see him nodding down there. And that would qualify you to be in the severe repetitive loss. And if you've got that classification with 4 losses, and if you're like me, I've had policies. I have one house that I've had a policy for 40 years on it. So, fortunately, I only had 1 loss and so on that one, but I have another one that I've had for 33 years, and we have, multiple losses on that. So think about the number of times that you've reported losses, and that will trigger it, and you can have them check your record if you want to find out about that. So I'm going to turn this back over to you, Pat.
Okay.
Okay?
Want a chair?
Yep. What?
Preferred risk policy, where do you get that?
Right from your insurance agent. And when
The
you,
question is related to preferred risk policies.
yes, they wanted to know where you would get it. You would go to your insurance agent, and he should be able to write this policy for you. Probably the most important thing would be to bring in a determination from the town hall that you're not in the special flood hazard area at this time, and that is what qualifies you for the preferred risk policy.
What if you're in the flood area now?
If you're in the flood area, then if you're already in the special flood hazard area, then you do not qualify for this policy. That's because you're already in what they call the standard flood insurance zone. So you would not qualify for this.
In other words, I've had a policy since 1972.
Right. And you're in the special flood hazard area?
I'm in V.
You're a V zone.
17.
Okay, you're what?
AO 17.
AO 17, you mean AE 17,
Supposedly the sea level,
right,
the new one that's coming out.
the new one coming out. Were you in the flood zone before?
I thought I was, but was left the impression I wasn't, but I go back to the Valentine Stone of 72.
Okay, well, I would check your map, the current map, and see. If you're not, and you know, there's a lot of discrepancies out there because
Well, I'm in the flood zone.
you are in the new map.
Yeah.
But if you weren't in the old map, that's the point here. If you aren't in the maps that are not going to be voted in until June of next year, all right, the ones that we've been talking about with all of these changes, if you're not in that at this time, you can go and get a preferred risk policy. Many people may have had flood insurance, but maybe they weren't in the flood zone. I have a policy on a house that was never in the flood zone, but I still had a policy on it. So
That's how I know.
it's high enough, right? And that would qualify you for this. The other thing is, you want to be sure your definition is correct on your property. And by that I mean, you might want to go down and check. You may have taken it out when it was a second home, now you're living in it full-time. That would make it your primary residence, and you would qualify to keep your pre-firm and your grandfathering status. So that will help you. And it will be a dramatically lower premium rate as time goes on. I've probably done more than they wanted me to do on insurance.
No, this is great.
Whoops, one more, okay, I'm sorry.
I have a question. If you are currently on the 2012 map in the floodplain, but you have an elevation certificate and a LOMA, and so you have not been required to have flood insurance, can you then get the
Preferred risk? Yes.
You can.
Yes.
Okay.
repeat the question?
Okay, let me repeat that question. She is currently a person who has an elevation certificate and a LOMA. That's a letter of map amendment. Unless your structure is located in the flood zone, you are not, you will not required to have flood insurance. So in other words, if your backyard is the A zone, and then all of a sudden you hit this line, and then your house is after that, you are not in the flood zone. Your property isn't. So a letter of map amendment would show that that's the case in that area. What that means is that you are eligible for the preferred risk policy. And so it's really important to know where you are. Yes, sir.
Who do you get a letter of
Map amendment. A letter of map amendment, there are two ways you can do this. One would be to have a surveyor, and you need a surveyor because of certain elevation information. However, on the FEMA site now, they have, it's an LOMC, and you can go in and do that as a homeowner yourself if you can answer the questions on there. And that's, of course, at no cost to you, and apply for it. With the new maps, they may be then thrown out, but it would allow you to get in on this preferred risk rate and this special way of phasing out your property over time, and it could save you thousands of dollars. So, yes.
Okay, should people who aren't currently in the flood zone map, but they're going to be, get the elevation certificate before they go with the preferred risk policy?
I would get the, okay, let me repeat the question. What she wanted to know is, should she get an elevation certificate done before, or just get the preferred risk policy where she knows she's going in? My feeling would be, you could always go back and get that elevation certificate done because the maps exist that were in effect at that time, at this time. I would say if you can go in and get the preferred risk policy, put your money into that and do that now. And Neil, I don't know if you agree with that or not.
Hi, Judy. What we advise people is if you're just in it, if it goes halfway through your house, and see if you can get a survey to come out and just do a quick elevation. Doesn't have to do a whole certificate. And if you're 2 feet higher than the proposed, I would definitely recommend getting a elevation certificate in a LOMA. In the meantime, we would encourage anybody who's that close to get flood insurance anyway, and particularly if you get a preferred risk. All right?
Yes.
above the baseline, does that still make you eligible for a map amendment?
It would, you would want to get an elevation certificate done, and if your house is higher than the zone, and then you would probably not need to carry, if the elevation certificate and the letter of map amendment showed you to be out of the zone, then you wouldn't need to carry the flood insurance. Right? Okay, Eric has an answer here.
Just want to add something to what Doris said. The letter of map amendment is issued based on your ground elevations and not the elevation of your house. So if you're saying that your house is higher than the base flood elevation, that's not the deciding factor. It's the ground elevation. And this would really be applicable in an A zone more so than in a V zone. Because in a V zone, it's difficult to remove a structure by letter of map amendment just because V zone elevations aren't based on ground elevations where A zone elevations are. Did that make sense to you? Do you understand?
So in the A zone, if there's a certain elevation that is required, like I think it's 8 inches, it's whatever it is. If your house is higher than that, your land is higher than that, then that's.
It depends, though. It depends. It's really the ground elevation directly adjacent to your structure is what they look at. And it's the lowest ground elevation directly adjacent to your structure.
Do we have any other questions?
But if you built an elevation structure to plant your house on, does that have any merit? In other words, my ground level is 10, but my first floor elevation is 19.65.
Okay.
You do not have a basement, correct?
I don't.
And you have flood openings?
No, I have a 2-car garage, a storage area, and an entranceway, but it's not the only entryway.
All right, let me just answer the question generally. If you have a house with no basement, a basement is defined as surrounded by grade on 4 sides, and your first floor is elevated, as yours is well above the base flood elevation, yet your ground is 10, and let's just say the base flood elevation is 15, all right? You are in a floodplain. However, if you put in flood openings to equalize the pressure of the water when it comes in several ways of doing that, and make sure all your appliances are raised above base flood elevation, all your furnaces, hot water heaters, things like that. The top of your first floor is 19. You are now more than 4 feet, 3 feet above, which should give you a favorable rate. So you may just have to put in a couple of flood openings. Okay?
Okay. Yes, sir.
Neil, this is probably directed more towards you. If you have a structure that was recently built and you hit the elevation that was required at the time, and you're maxed out at the height of the dwelling, the new maps come in, they raise the elevation by just say a foot or 2. Is there any leeway between elevating that house again because you're already maxed out at the height?
We're going to introduce a bylaw for...
Excuse me, Neil, could you repeat the question? I don't think...
yeah, okay. The question was, if your house was elevated under a prior map, say the 2012, it met the elevation requirement. In the new map, the elevation, it goes up to a foot. And your house is maxed out as to height. If it's only a foot, first thing I'll do is leave my tape measure back at the office. But we are seriously considering introducing a bylaw that would address that exact situation, yeah, because we don't want to do anything to prevent you from going 3 or 4 feet higher than required. We're not going to make you cut off the top of your first floor. So that's my answer.
Do we have any other questions? Oh, here we go. Okay, yes.
I'm just curious, how many people were in the flood zone prior to, and how many homes were
The question is, how many people were in the flood zone and how many have been added? The number that we have been using is about 500 homes that were added here in Scituate. So that's the new number that have been added in.
About 2,000, we're figuring 2,000 homes in it right now.
About 2,000 now?
Yeah.
Including
going up
the
another-
500 or?
No, 2,000 and going up another 500.
Okay, another 2,500. So about 25% increase in the number of structures. Yes, sir, way in the back. I have not been in any of those meetings, but I'm thinking maybe Neil. It's my understanding that the companies that did this, they went to the transepts and they have identified different elevations, and that those elevations are lower than what the company for FEMA identified. And I don't know, Neil, if you have more?
So the question is, I'm not exactly sure what the question is. Something.
Huge.
Systems that have been out of the floodplain as far as your heating and hot water and whatnot, moving it up a dramatic extra 5 feet and throw first floor buildings with their systems below the flood level. So is there any kind of appeal being done to limit that 15-foot elevation rise that was part of the map?
The question is does the appeal specifically address, just say, a change in elevation of 5 feet? It does not. I have read one of the appeals, and what the appeal essentially does, it's challenging the methodology used by the FEMA subcontractor, and we're just going to have to wait and see. There's a process, and I have heard that their best expectation, it will lower it by 1 to 2 feet, perhaps.
Yes.
You read that if you have a mortgage, you will be required to have flood insurance. Will you be notified by anybody, or is the onus on you to carry that through?
You will be notified by your bank, and your bank, the last thing, and I have to say this, that we have wanted was to have anybody receive a notice by your bank that you now have to have flood insurance, and it's after the date the maps become active or are in effect. And for that reason, because at that time your only option will be to go into the standard flood insurance rating, and we want people to enter under the preferred risk, which could be thousands of dollars in difference. I mean, really, it could be the difference between getting a policy of under $500 versus one over $10,000. So there is a huge reason to get it beforehand, but the person notifying you more than likely will be your bank if you have a mortgage. And I know I've already received notice from one. Yes, go ahead.
Further question, the new map shows my backyard in. The house is not in the flood zone, but the backyard is. Neither were in the last map, or the present map. So, do I have to get flood insurance?
The question is, his house is not in, but his backyard is. What you have to do is be able to prove that you're outside the special flood hazard area. And to do that, you would be required to either have a site plan or an elevation certificate would show the same thing, that you're outside that. And therefore, because you're outside, then you would be okay, and then you might go on to a Loma.
How do you know the floodplain line? How do you know where it is on your property right now, may I ask?
Whether I was in it or not?
Yes.
When I went to get a building permit at one time, they checked to see that whether it was in, and they told me it was not.
But do you know that it is in there now?
I look at the maps that are at the library, and it comes right to the white spot is my house, and then the blue on there is the flood zone.
All right, I think just the general question is if the line, the new line, old line is on your property, does it impact your flood insurance? The answer is no. If the structure, the insured structure must be in the floodplain. If the line is on your property somewhere other than in the vicinity or proximate to your house, you don't need flood insurance for that house. I would suggest you come to Town Hall and get a determination from us to see if you are not in the floodplain in the proposed, and bring that to your insurance company before, you may ultimately have to get an engineer, but see if that works with your insurance company.
Thank you. I'll see you in the morning.
Fine. Be there.
One more thing I'd like to add is that the bank may not know where that line is. So consequently, the bank only looks at the address, and they may notify you, and then you would have to bring this forth to the bank so that they can say, no, he's not in the floodplain, his particular structure isn't. And they will be fined, banks with this new legislation will be fined $2,000 a property for every one that they do not have flood insurance on. It used to be $350. So your banks are going to be very highly motivated at $2,000 a property. Just wanted to let you know that. Yes?
In regards to the appeal process, I know the letter's already been sent by the town and everything, but I keep reading we should be sending our own letters to our representatives. I'm not sure what I put in that, except that I think that this stinks. Because there's somewhere we get that information from as far as setting appeals, so we were sending our own letters as far as the CRS, who and helping include that. Do they send letters somewhere for that, or how does that all work?
David wants to answer this, so look.
If I understand the question correctly, you're asking how to contact your legislators to do something to fix this? Is that correct?
I mean, I want to know what I'm going to say to him that he doesn't already know. Just a letter from me, from my address where I'm located, and say, I don't approve of this? Or do I include any information from the town that they're providing me that says, to help you people enforce what you're trying to do?
Okay, well, a couple of quick things. We're expecting Representative Jim Cantwell here in a little bit. He was at the State House at a hearing. Jim Cantwell has done a fantastic job of being on top of this and has been urging the federal delegation from Massachusetts to come on board and try to do something. All of them have, the two senators and all the congressmen from Massachusetts. So that is in place. I know a lot of us feel that, we're very glad that the town did the appeal. That was a big step. But what really has to happen, in our mind anyway, from the Scituate Coastal Coalition, is that Congress has to fix all the flaws in bigger waters, which is what is going to cause these insurance rates to skyrocket. If you go onto our website at Scituate Coastal Coalition, you will find there ways and phone numbers to get hold of your legislators. Even though all the Massachusetts delegation has signed on and wants to do something, I think it's a very good idea to keep the pressure on, to keep reminding them that this has to happen. There are many national organizations that are on board with trying to get this thing fixed. National Bankers Association, National Realtors Association, National Association of Home Builders. There's a major effort in many, many states, but it's not going to be easy. I just heard today that there's going to be a hearing in the Senate, I believe on November 13th. This is not going to be an easy an easy time for us, but we're hopeful. I don't know if that really answers your question, but the other organization that Doris is involved with is the Marshfield Citizens Coastal Coalition. They also have on their website an easy way to, as I understand it, to contact all of the legislators that need to be contacted. So you might want to look at that website as well.
One more time, the name? Marshfield Citizen?
Mark?
There is a phone letter on there that you can sign and send in.
The name of that organization, Marshfield and Scituate the two towns are working very closely together, and the two coastal coalitions are working very closely together. Marshfield's organization is called Marshfield Citizens Coastal Coalition. I would suggest you take a look at both websites, Scituate Coastal Coalition and Marshfield Citizens Coastal Coalition.
One of the things that you might consider in putting into a letter like that would be some of the history of your home, if in fact you know that, and if you know any of the actual elevations. And the other thing I would do is see your insurance, in your insurance man, and have him price out what your house would be at the full rate of flood insurance. So in other words, your letter might say that one, never had a loss, two, I'm outside the 1% storm, I never had any problem with the blizzard of '78, which is our 1% storm, and the third thing is, if this is done to me, I will have to pay $6,000 a year for flood insurance when it's just not a problem with my property. So that I think would be a very strong point of view. Oh, a couple more hands, all right. Yes, sir.
Has this new law affected the entire Atlantic coast, the Gulf Coast, the Mississippi, Missouri Valley?
Everything.
No, but it will. It, at this point, was phased in. With the new maps, we were phased in along Mississippi, along the Gulf of Mexico, and along this portion of New England, and I'm not sure, Eric, if you know how far south it went, and it's about to...
Are you talking about the new maps, or you're talking about Biggert Waters?
Biggert Waters is national. New maps are phasing in over a 5-year plan.
But
And
eventually, this will impact all of the, I would assume, the Atlantic coast, the Gulf Coast, from our past awareness of the hurricanes and the storms we had in the past, throughout all these regions.
That's correct.
And
That's
I
correct.
envision the larger the body of people affected, the larger the congressional delegation is, that's going to be pressured into providing some type of reconsideration.
I guess you're figuring right then. The more people affected, the more Congress is going to be pressured into acting.
yes, sir,
Generally.
you would be...
Yes,
yeah.
I have a property in Scituate that's probably 30, 40 years old, on a marsh, no problems with incidents of flooding. And I have a flood insurance because I have a mortgage. If I pay off a mortgage, do I still need flood insurance?
No, you do not. If you do not have a mortgage, you do not... Oh, let me repeat the question. If he pays off, if you have a property that does not have a mortgage, do you need flood insurance? And the answer to that is no, you do not need flood insurance. It would be at your own decision to have it. Flood insurance is required if you have a mortgage. And what they have done here, and this is legislation that Jim has going before the legislature here, and what it's going to do is limit the amount that a policy will be to just the amount of the mortgage. So if you have a $50,000 mortgage, all you have to have for your flood insurance is $50,000, not the $250,000, which is often banks want us to have what the value of the property is. Yes, okay, see?
I'll just add something. I want to just add that it's not just a mortgage, it's any type of loan, so it could be a mortgage, it could be a home equity loan, home equity line of credit, reverse mortgage, and I'm probably leaving out one or two things, but it's any type of loan that you have with the structure as collateral.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, you in the plaid? Or I guess it's red.
I was wondering, are there plans by the town to mitigate the accumulation of water that keeps expanding the flood zones?
Can I, Doris, can I answer? I believe the question was, what is the town going to do to try to keep away some of the flooding that can take place right now? Maybe somebody from town hall would be better qualified to answer, but I wanted to answer this because I'm also on the seawall committee, and this is one of the things that we've been talking about. I believe that it's not a hard and fast policy yet, but the thinking from DPW is this: when they do a major reconstruction of any foreshore protection project, that it will be at least 2 feet higher than it is now. There's a major revetment project going on at the lighthouse, as many of you may know, and that is above the V-zone elevation of flooding. That's just one example. On Turner Road, there was a breach in the wall. That wall has been built 2 feet higher. So I think going forward, yeah, there will be efforts made. It's not going to be any quick fix, however.
Is there additional information from the town in that regard?
I'll just add that the town did an extensive seawall study not too long ago, and they've rated the seawalls that need replacement, and as everything else in town, whether it be water lines or what have you, it all depends on money. The town certainly is interested in raising up the seawalls and protecting not only homes but infrastructure.
Yes.
Is the flood insurance based on a co-insurance factor, just like regular homeowners? Or is it if you lose, if you just only have it insured for $50,000 and you have a $30,000 loss, you get paid for $30,000?
It is always, and Eric, maybe you can talk about this, it's my understanding that if you had a $30,000 loss, it would cover you. Where the co-insurance or the actual cash value would come in would be if it's a second home or a business, they are done in that manner. And I was at the seminar today, we talked about so I will say that I think I'm fairly correct. If it's your primary residence, then you will be covered at the full amount that your damage might be. If it's a second home or if it's a business, then they would do the actual cash value unless you were insured for the value of the structure or the maximum of $250,000. Yes. Okay. Yes.
Now, along with that, there was somebody talking about the homeowner's insurance requiring that you do have flood insurance. And was that to the discretion of the insurance company? Is that something people should find out ahead of time, or is there any truth in that?
Well, it has happened in parts of the country. The question here is, would your homeowner's insurance require you to have flood insurance? That has happened in parts of the country. It goes back to a lawsuit after Katrina in which property owners down there who did not have flood insurance sued their homeowners insurance because they felt they should have been told that that was a risk they did not cover. And unfortunately, they won the lawsuit and the insurance company had to pay out, so that's part of what's been going on in that area.
So that would affect people that aren't paying off their mortgage. If you pay that off, there still could be that homeowner's insurance requirement.
It could be, yes. That's a good reason why, if you're not in the flood zone now, anybody in the town of Scituate is eligible for the PRP policy. And I always like to tell people, if you have a grate out in front of your house and that gets iced over and the water could flood, we get a ton of rain, and it could roll into your house, the only thing that will protect you is flood insurance. Oh, yes, sir.
I recall with all the newspaper clippings and whatnot lately, I'm not sure if I saw it in the paper or something that Dave sent around. I get those notices too, thank you. Something about people who bought the house after 2012 was automatically in some kind of problem. And people who may have bought their homes prior to 2012, which is obviously not that long ago, were in a different category. But I didn't quite understand the whole article, I guess.
Yes, let me say what happened. This legislation passed July 6th of 2012. As of that date, even though we didn't know about it, it became the law. And what they've done is they've gone back during even fall of 2012 and right now, and they've made it retroactive to people. So if you bought a home after July of 2012, July 6th, and you're in a flood zone or it was grandfathered, they may start working down your grandfathering at this moment in time or fully change the policy on you.
And before 12?
And before 12, you're grandfathered. Before July 6th, you're grandfathered. Yes, if you were July 5th, you were grandfathered.
Yeah, no.
Yes, sir.
So that's specifically the grandfathering issue. If you were within the flood zone prior to this new legislation, and you had flood insurance, are you some way grandfathered against the new rates?
The question is, if you were in the flood insurance, zone and had flood insurance, are you grandfathered against the new rates? And the answer to that is, unfortunately, no. The new rates are going to ultimately wipe out grandfathering, but that's an area that's a little bit more hazy, and they really couldn't even want to talk about a specific date today. It's supposed to start as of October of 2014. What they were more definite about was the prefirm structures. And those are structures that were built prior to the town adopting the flood insurance regulations.
What's that date?
I believe the date is 1977, Neil, that we use,
I believe it's 74, but.
Of the first maps?
of the flood insurance, the prefirm.
The first maps came out in 77. I think we had flood insurance prior to that.
Right, we did, yeah. 73 was my first
74,
policy.
yeah.
Okay, I just want to provide a little bit of clarification. I'm reading from what's called a Biggert Waters 2012 Quick Reference Guide, and this is a very handy document that you can find very easily on the internet if you Google BW12 Quick Reference Guide. And it'll tell you what's going to happen to your rates based on whether you have a new policy as of July 6, 2012, as Doris said, or if it's a policy that was in effect prior to July 6, 2012. If you want me to give you a quick rundown, it's more than I can read to you right now, but
Google again, please.
if you Google BW12, B as in Biggert, W as in Waters, Biggert Waters, BW-12, Quick Reference Guide. I have a bunch of them up here if you want to look at it and write it down, or you can pass them around or something like that. But the difference between what will happen to your rates, a pre-firm, primary or non-primary residence, policy first in effect on or after July 6, 2012, would go to immediate shift in full risk rates. Okay?
Can you say that again?
I will say that again. A pre-firm primary or non-primary residence with a policy first in effect after July 6, 2012, as of October 1st, 2013, would go to an immediate shift to full risk rates. Now, here's the difference. A pre-firm primary residence with a policy in effect before July 6, 2012 would have an average increase of 16 to 17% within the 20% cap as authorized by law as of October 1st, 2013. I think it would be better, rather than me trying to read all the different things to you, if you want to take a look at this, I'll leave some of them up here on the table. You can look at them afterwards. Or, like I said, it's very easy to find on Google. When I Googled it, it was the very first thing that at the top of the list. And you click right on it and you look at it, and you can see what would happen to your rate based on whether you are pre-firm or post-firm, or
is that the manner in which they gradually increase it to its ultimate cost?
Can you repeat that, please?
I didn't fully understand when you said the pre-2012 policyholders would be limited to a 16% increase, or is that the first of the graduated increases to the ultimate cost?
That would be, well, that would be what happens on October 1st, 2013.
16%?
And 16 to 17% is what this says.
And then what happens?
And then, going forward into the future, increases are based on actuarial analysis and the reserve fund, which is something I really can't explain fully to you because I don't fully understand it myself.
You're basically saying we could end up with a maximum increase of 16%?
What it's saying is, on October 1st, 2013, an increase, an average increase of 16 to 17% would take place. And that's for primary residents with a policy in place before July 6, 2012.
Secondary residents.
Secondary residence is different.
What happened to that?
Secondary residents with a policy in effect prior to July 6, 2012 would have a 25% premium increase at renewal as of January 1st, 2013. So that actually already happened. And then going forward, 25% annual until full risk rates are reached. You want to take these?
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing. With the Bigger Waters Act, one of the things that changed is there was always a cap on how much our rates could be increased any 1 year, and that cap was a 10% cap. With Bigger Waters, everybody who had policies, we can now have an increase up to 20%. And this year's increase is, as Eric was saying, is 16% to 17% for pre-existing policies. And for people who are secondary residents, that number is going to be at 25%. So we're all getting a much higher rate adjustment than we would have gotten in past years.
Is that a cap?
The cap is 20%. That's the maximum amount. There is also per year.
That's what
And
I'm
then,
trying to find out.
okay, yes, it's per year. And then the other thing is there's a 5% amount that's being added onto our policies to develop what's known as the catastrophic fund. And that is money that's to stay in the program so that when we have these really bad storm years, there's money there and we would not have to borrow from the federal government. Okay, this gentleman over
I
here.
haven't had much luck finding contractors to do elevations. Do you have any list of contractors that specifically elevate houses?
That, you mean elevate or do elevation certificates?
No, actually elevate a house.
Yeah, we do. If you come see me afterwards, I'll give you my card and we can do it by email.
I mean, we're talking a lot of insurance, and it's all going to happen, but we really have to talk about prevention.
Right, and that is something that's very important, and we all want to talk about that. Yes, Rosemary?
Along those lines of what we can do aside from insurance, could I ask Neil a question? I know this is kind of a hot button issue, but decks. Is there anything people can do with their decks if they're constructing new or reconstructing after a storm to, at one point, I believe it was possible to, if you could separate your deck from your house.
Are you talking about getting it out of the velocity zone?
That, and anything that would help to
All right, the question is, I think, does an attached deck where a floodplain line goes through your deck, does that make your entire structure, put your entire structure in the floodplain? And the answer is yes. The question is, can I separate the deck from the dwelling and take the dwelling out of the floodplain? You can physically separate that deck from the dwelling, and that will take your dwelling out of the floodplain if you're in one of those situations. Another situation we get every so often is houses on the waterfront. They have decks that are in the velocity zone, but the house is not in the velocity zone. Same rule applies. You can separate your deck physically from the house, and your house is in something other than a velocity zone. Although we always encourage people who are that close, put it up to the velocity zone standard, but we can only encourage you.
Any other questions? Okay, the lady there in, okay, the question is, does anybody have an idea of how high these policies can go, or can they continue to go up 16% a year? I think one of the things that we are definitely planning on doing is reversing the 20% increase cap back to a 10% cap, and encouraging our legislatures in Washington to restore that to existing. I mean, if we think of 20%, it's way outside the realm of anything you would use, inflation, anything you would use to measure by. And that's something that I personally feel, it's unfair. I have flood insurance, and I have no idea. For probably forever. Yes.
Doris, can you give us an example of what an actuarial rate would be if you had a $500,000 valued house? Just give us what that rate would be per year as an actuarial.
I can't answer that question. I'm not an insurance person, nor am I an actuary. But to answer the question that was already out on the floor, the increases that happen annually are intended to continue until actuarial rates are achieved. And I already told you that I don't know what I can't answer a policy-specific question of what the actuarial rate would be, because there are too many factors that go into it. And even if I knew all the factors, you'd really need an insurance person to answer that.
But isn't the cap $250,000?
That's the limit of coverage on a residential structure.
Well, that's the limit. Or do we have to pay for flood insurance on the property itself?
I honestly can't answer that. I don't know.
We can't collect anything for any damage to the property.
The maximum that you can insure a residential structure for is $250,000. What I believe the question that the young lady was asking is, what will be the cost of that coverage on the $250,000? How much will it cost a year to have that? That is going to vary tremendously because of the zones people can be in. I'll give you two examples that I can give you only because I pay these policies. One is and both of them are elevated structures, but one is an A zone, and it's $340 a year. It is 3 feet above the base flood elevation, and that's the price that I pay for that policy.
What is the base flood elevation at the moment?
At that particular property, it's 10 feet, and the house is 13 feet. And so being at that level, anybody who's thinking about lifting your home, there is one thing you must do, and that's go 3 feet higher. And if you go that 3 feet, you get the best rate. I asked that again today because they were showing one at 4 feet, and they said no, that 3 feet and 4 feet, minimal difference, but 3 feet gets you the best rate. When I elevated my house over on Oceanside Drive, my policy at that time, which was 2010, was $5,400 a year. When I elevated the house, I went 3 feet higher.
From the base?
from the base flood elevation, which in my area was 20 feet. I went 3 more feet, which was 23 feet to the top of, because I'm a V-zone, to the top of the piling. And what that did for me was to drop my flood insurance premium back to $2,200 a year. So I saved $3,200 a year. Since then, of course, the rates have been going up, but I still get a significantly lower rate, and maybe my rate would be $8,000 a year if I didn't have what I have for a property. And I've had no losses, which is the other thing, and that's why the 3 feet is critical. The 3 feet typically represents where the 500-year storm would occur.
That's 10 feet? You got a question over there.
Yes, sir.
I've been anticipating, this situation and have already gone to my insurance company.
Okay.
I'm not declared now in the flood zone. And when I asked our insurance company for a quote on the preferred risk, they drew this from FEMA, which is a standard flood hazard determination form.
Right.
And that particular form shows my property in this present day and time in X with an asterisk. And that asterisk says, subject property is partially within the flood hazard area. The existing structure, however, is not affected in the floodplain. That's as of now.
Right. Therefore, you would be eligible for a preferred risk policy,
Right.
which would cost you less than $500 a year.
Another thing on this standard form from FEMA, it refers to everything on here as a loan and collateral. I'm not putting my house up for collateral or a loan to FEMA.
I don't know what, I don't know that I've ever
You want to
read
look
that.
at it?
No. I'll let Eric have this one.
Do you have a loan on your house?
Yes.
Do you have more?
Yeah.
That's what they're talking about. They're not talking about putting your house up for collateral to FEMA. They are not. And the other thing about the standard flood hazard determination form, it is a FEMA form. It is not necessarily sent to you from FEMA. Somebody else fills out that form.
Logistic, Call Logistic put it out.
Okay, then that's who sent you the form. FEMA didn't send you.
Well,
It is just a standard form.
My insurance company got it from them.
Okay.
Yeah. But this, I was going to volunteer for the insurance and the preferred risk to get into the grandfathering.
Yes.
And did this research to try to accomplish that task.
Right. And that clearly says you're out now.
Yes.
And you may be going in with the new maps.
Yes.
So you're a perfect candidate for the preferred risk policy, and I would take that out as soon as you can and do that.
All right. Is there any set rates on the preferred policy?
Yes, yes. The rates are very much set, and they're set based upon whether you have a basement or I believe it's a crawl space or enclosure. And the max on it, I want to say, is around $454, and that's for two, and that's with a basement. And the other one I think is around $217. So, and it starts at $129, depending on what amount of coverage you want.
I had a particular quote of 400.
Yep. So you're right in there. That's the max. Yep.
Yeah.
Do it now.
Do it now. Yep. Yes.
Just getting back to that preferred risk policy, if you purchased a home after July 6, 2012, that was, and it's a second home, that was not in a floodplain then, but is in the new floodplain, is your home still eligible for that preferred risk policy?
Yes. Yes, it would be eligible. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yep, I got to repeat the question. Her question was, if you purchased a home after July 6th of 2012, and the house was located in the, not located in the special flood hazard area at this time, new maps put it in, and it's a second home, is she still eligible? I know of no reason that you're not eligible for a preferred risk of policy. Okay? Say again?
What happens if it's your primary residence?
Primary, same thing. You're still eligible for a preferred risk. Okay? That's, oh, okay. Over here. Okay, yes, sir.
I just have, hopefully someone could help me out just with
clarification on the implementation of bigger water. So I had purchased after 2012, I have an elevation certificate. It's a post-firm house, but I'm elevated, I was like 3.5 feet above. But now on the new map, we got raised 7 or 8 feet, so I'm under. Now, with that, am I gonna be delayed, getting basically a 20% reduction, or could I basically go to full risk rates because I bought after 2012? And also, I had an insurance policy in place that was basically signed over from the previous owner.
So you bought after July 6th of 2012.
Right.
According to the legislation, they claim that they will retroactively go back and move you in, and that's supposed to be happening as of renewal periods after October of this year.
Even if there was a policy in place on the house throughout that whole period?
If the policy, it's the policy in place
Right.
that counts. So if the policy was in place prior to July 6, 2012, then he falls into the other category.
You think, okay.
But
good.
also, it's a post-firm house. So
Okay.
post-firm are all theoretically
Grandfathered,
rated
yeah.
actuarially.
Rated, but his concern is the new maps now show him being, how many feet did you say?
Well, right, that's almost a separate issue, I think, but, I mean, it's still a huge thing. I mean, yeah, my house was elevated 3.5 feet above, and now I'm 3.5 feet below. And my house is raised 6 feet. So, I mean, that's a whole different issue, but.
Right. Okay, any more questions?
Yes.
Oh.
Right, yeah, so it's the 20%, right?
Yes.
Are the pre-firm that preferred rate only for people who are in an X? So-
X, or if you were on your old policy, you might have noticed a B or C. Those are also those zones.
But any of the A's are not?
A or V are not, those are in the special flood hazard area. All A's, all V's are special flood hazard area. Yes.
So, the appeal that we have in Marshall and Scituate, is that's for the maps only? Is that anything to do with rates or feelings or limited?
Map only.
Map
only, yes. The only way that the Bigger Waters Act can be changed is through changing the legislation in Washington. And so that is where we have to make that change, is with the legislatures in Washington.
We should push for higher deductibles.
Yes.
You push it for term limits.
As I understand it, you can get up to a $5,000 deductible now.
Only showing 1,000.
Well, it's funny, because I was at the seminar today, and they were showing a $5,000 deductible. Okay, Neil's nodding too, right? You've heard the $5,000?
I know someone who has one.
Right, I know I have a $2,000 deductible on my policies, so.
Does that make a considerable difference
Yes.
in the premiums?
Yes, yes. The higher the deductible, the lower the premium.
Do you know what type of percentage that is if you went from a 500 to a 5,000 on a
I think-
250 policy?
I think mine, and again, it depends on your zone and what your overall policy was, but I know when I did it on mine, I want to say it dropped mine down by at least $1,000 or $1,500 a year on my coverage. I was in a V zone with
And you
very
were
high.
right, you had 5,000, you said it dropped to 1,000, so it dropped to 20%.
I dropped it from, I want to say 500 to 2,000 at that time.
Doris, can I just add?
Yeah.
One other thing that I think is important to understand, as we understand it anyway, when FEMA figures out the ratings for the actuarial tables or even the grandfather tables, there's what's called basic coverage, and basic coverage is the first $60,000 of the $250,000 that's available. And then there's the extended coverage that's past that. And on a lot of these rating tables, you'll see that the rates are quite high for the first 60,000, and then they drop off considerably. You might be paying $2 or $3 per 100 for the first 60,000, and then it drops off to 35 or 40 or 50 cents. And so people need to be aware that just by cutting your coverage in half, you're not going to be cutting your premium that you have to pay in half. The other thing I just want to say again, it's really important that people make an effort to contact their legislators. This is the only way this is going to get fixed. FEMA can't fix this. It was a law that was passed by Congress, and the only place that it can be fixed is in Congress. So make those phone calls.
What can be fixed? When you say fixed, what can actually be fixed?
Change the legislation.
So will some of us maybe come back out of a flood zone if this is so-called fixed?
Two different issues. One is correcting the rate structure within Biggert Waters, and the other is the maps. Hopefully, what the town has done with the filing will bring the maps back into a more reasonable and more logical, but at the same... If the maps are changed, yes, that would allow your elevations to go down is what they're going after. What the other thing is to do is to change the Biggert Waters Act, and right now we have Jim Cantwell here who has been working diligently on this, and I want to invite him up, and if there are more questions afterwards, we'll answer them at that point in time, okay? So come on in, Jim. You're welcome.
Doris, thank you so much, and I apologize for being late. There are quite a few things tonight, but this is by far the most important thing, clearly, that's happening to all of us on the coast. And the one message I want to bring for people tonight is there is hope. You know, we have seen this. It's impossible to overstate how disastrous this act would be for all of us up and down the coast. But I want you to know is people are hearing us, and we are seeing at every single level, we're seeing some progress. First, you need to know our town officials in Scituate and Marshfield, they are doing everything that's possible. This issue has just overtaken our town hall. So I know with Neil being here, and obviously with Rick for public safety, and that folks, we have over 100 people, we were having over 100 people a day coming into town hall to learn about what their rights were. As you already heard tonight, I won't repeat too much of it, but the appeals were filed last week. We've already found, in our view, these maps, we knew they were ridiculous from the beginning, right? And we were just doing that from our knowledge of what happened with the blizzard of '78 and how high the water had come. Because remember, we were talking about how they've gone well beyond that. But the appeals being filed, we were able to hand them in person. We were up at FEMA. One of the only good things that happened about the government shutdown is the person who accepted the appeals is a guy named Paul Ford, who was the acting regional administrator for FEMA. He was there accepting them. We got to sit down and talk to him for half an hour. They get it. We were telling him face to face, saying this act is killing our communities. We went through what it's doing to real estate, what it's going to be doing to banks, what it's going to be doing to all of our individual homeowners for the loss of value. What he absolutely said face to face is saying that he knows of the people who we have hired, both here for Scituate and for Marshfield, both engineering teams, that they're going to look at the scientific data. We should know in Portland, they withdrew maps there before when we pointed out deficiencies in their maps. In New Jersey, they rewrote them and came back. So there is a hope. No one can promise you. What I can tell you is the people here, people have done everything we possibly can. That's at the local level. At the state level, I hope that you saw, we filed a bill. I filed a bill back in January. I had no idea Biggert Waters was taking place. But it was legislation demanding that the State Division of Insurance review how flood insurance is determined. That had a hearing just on September 17th. We had 51 state legislators from across the whole state saying this is the #1 priority for them because people across, this is a statewide issue. With that, we had a letter that we brought down to D.C. We got to meet face to face with Senator Warren, face to face with Senator Markey, with Congressman Keating, with Congressman Lynch. Congressman Lynch, as you all know, has come out several times. They have spoken with one voice saying that this act needs to be frozen, that we need to be able to make some substantive changes and then look for a manner to keep the National Flood Insurance Program going. One thing I want to stress is we need FEMA. We need them to run their program appropriately. The problem was, we all need to realize in Washington, there are some people who hate anything about government at all. They tried to get rid of this program. Part of the reason we have a problem is there were folks last year in Washington who said, we don't want to subsidize anything. And we don't want to underwrite anything. And they tried to kill the program. The folks down there should have done a better job, in my view, but just to keep the program alive, they passed Biggert Waters. It got attached to other bills. It was, frankly, I think should have needed more due diligence. But I heard that the question was what can be done. Everyone should be calling our federal legislators. Now that our appeals are done, we need their help to put pressure to have FEMA hopefully change the maps or withdraw them. That's the first ask. The other is for Bigger Waters, for what kind of changes they can make, and we wanted to support them. The call should always be, thank you. We know every one of our legislators has asked their leadership to freeze this act in place. So they need to, though, continually hear from us that this is a priority so that this doesn't fall off from their radar screen. But I appreciate everyone coming out, and I have to have a hand of applause, one for the towns and for the town work, but also for David Ball, for all the folks, Rosemary, for all the folks in the Scituate Coastal Coalition and the Marshall Coastal Coalition, for Doris. You guys have done a phenomenal job with this, so thank you so much. I'll be staying, so I'm happy to take questions as well, David. I'm not sure how the program is running, but happy to take questions as well.
Yeah, we've been asking, questions from the audience, and I think there'll probably be some more right now, so.
Yeah, real quick question is, what about the town itself? Does it have to pay these insurances? Like this building here alone?
It will affect the town. For town now, the town has umbrella buildings, umbrella policies, but it's going to affect the town. It'll affect all of our insurance, and Neil will know.
Yeah, if the town has an insured building, they would be affected similarly by the rates. And I don't know what the insurance position is in the town. We have over 100 buildings. That would be a lot of money, yes. I can't tell you they have no mortgage on them, though.
Jim.
Yes. We've mentioned here the actuarial survey of this of this act. My understanding of the actuarians is that they examine what actually happened and come up with a rate. If I understand this bill correctly, they're trying to make the premiums pay all of the losses. And that's where the actuarian comes in. He looks at it and says, okay, here's what they cost you. You got to collect the premiums to pay it. The gentleman in the back said, is it going to go up every year 25%? It's going to go up to ad infinitum if the weather keeps getting bad. So we don't know where it's going to go, if it's going to stick. And to me, they put the bill in to really phase FEMA out, because by not supporting any subsidies for the insurance, the policy holders will go broke trying to keep it alive. Am I wrong?
I think we can't make assumptions on what was behind the thinking on developing some of these maps, but
Am I wrong in saying that this is going to have to be paid for by premiums? The losses?
Isn't it true that the federal program actually has had a surplus for the majority of years that it's been in existence? And the difficulty is, instead of keeping the money in the federal flood insurance program, they return the money to the federal government to be used as general income.
You're absolutely, the gentleman's absolutely right. This is one thing we kept stressing. And when we use the term, by the way, I always say it's the federal government underwriting a program. I don't use the term subsidy because that's what got us into some trouble with folks in D.C. saying we don't want to subsidize anything. So by the federal government underwriting this program, from 1968 right up until Katrina, it had over a $10 billion surplus, correct?
Yes.
That was returned right back, but as you said, it was not. Usually an insurance company tries to put money in, and they try to have X holdings that they get ready for.
They're mandated by law to
right.
have a reserve.
So, as an insurance company would be, but not this program is not. So one of the reforms is saying, we get it, that there will be, in my view, they are going to look and say, well, we're going to have areas now, because of the more recent storms and that, there may be some areas that they'll say we want to have people who will have to have some flood insurance. We understand part of that, but what we can't accept is the maps and what they're claiming, what the monies that people have to pay. Let me give you an example, by the way, why we have some hope. When we were in D.C. listening to one of these banking hearings, as you would expect, our senators from Massachusetts did a great job. There's senators from New Jersey, from New York, 2 senators, all bipartisan, from Louisiana. But what got my attention, there was one senator from Montana and another one from Oklahoma. And you know, they're inland, right? They were so angry because they turned to the administrator for FEMA and said, listen, you just changed the way you calculate rates. It used to be at the first floor level, and then you decide what kind of insurance. Now by going to the basement. One of the senators pointed his finger and said, in my state, every home has a basement. Because our last refuge, when we have a tornado, is people go into their basement for refuge. He said, you just increased my cost for all my residents. So I will tell you that what we're hearing from them, there is an understanding that this is across the nation, this is affecting folks. They have to try to do something right now. There are a couple of vehicles for federal legislation to hopefully freeze things now. But as we're waiting for that, what we have to do is, one, continue to make sure we contact our legislators, thank them for now, you know, that they are doing hard work trying to make sure to undo this mess, but additionally let them know what's happening to you. They need to have specific stories about how this is making it impossible for people to do business and how it's going to cut out all of our life savings. I do want to mention, to go with the gentleman's question over here, state legislation, we are preempted by a lot of this federal law, but one thing we can do is prevent banks from making people get insurance for their entire value of their home. I don't know if people heard, it used to be under the policies you would only have to get insurance to cover your mortgage. And most recently the banks were, and David knows this, because the banks were telling people, no, we're going to have you insure the entire replacement value of your home and the entire contents of your home and even the land that you have. So at the state level, we aren't preempted from that. That's what we filed last week, is state legislation telling our banks in Massachusetts, you cannot force any person in Massachusetts to have more insurance than just for their mortgage. So if we're looking for what we can do, that's one place where we can help. Young lady back here. It's hard to know, because you know the sadness of this is seeing how dysfunctional Washington is. When we were down there, and we talked to every congressperson, and they said, because this affordability study, you probably covered it already, because the affordability study was supposed to be done before this act took effect. They were supposed to know what the financial implications would be. That affordability study was never done. When we're asking the FEMA people, why the hell didn't you do that first before having these disastrous implications? And they said, look, sequestration, they cut our money, we don't have any funds for it. I asked them point blank, why didn't you do peer review of these maps to realize if they're projecting 200 mile per hour winds, and they're projecting that instead of elevation 10 down here, going to 15, and projecting in Marshfield 3-foot waves hitting buildings that are like 5 miles inland. What they're saying back, we knew on the face that was ridiculous, right? But we had to spend money, Scituate did, Marshfield did, to try to prove that the analysis is wrong. What they keep coming back is saying is that we weren't giving enough funds to try to do our full evaluation. So, when I'm getting to your point, right, for the legislation, right now they're looking for what things will they know will pass. What legislation is automatically going to come through that we can have our federal legislators attach the amendment to. And they're looking at a Homeland Security bill that hopefully is going to be acted upon this calendar year. That's one hope, right, is that they're going to get muster enough support to try to attach that to a bill, because enough questions have been asked nationally. I don't have a crystal ball, though, to give you any promises. That's why I'm so pleased about what the town's already done for these appeals. We're going to make sure we're not going to let any appeal period lapse. We're not going to let any argument lapse. We're doing everything that we can to make sure we're protected as best we can until they take corrective action in Washington. Does that answer your question well enough? Thank you.
Okay. Hi. My neighbor and I, we're down on Jericho. We're kind of new to we're around the 500. He had an engineer come in. I've got a couple of issues, a couple of problems that maybe other people don't have. Number one, I have a basement. I have a little tiny house with a basement. I always thought that was a good thing. Evidently not. But we don't have the money to raise the houses either. But they say that since it's a cinder block foundation, it can't be raised anyway.
There's a question about a basement on a house on Jericho Road. I'm going to give this to Neil.
Who's they?
Oh, the engineer that came in and did the house next door.
The structural engineer?
Evidently.
All right. He must have evaluated your foundation.
He didn't do mine. He did the house next door.
Oh, you need to evaluate your individual foundation. You know, a lot of the.
I couldn't afford to raise it anyway.
A lot of the cottages in Scituate were built on cedar posts, and they were infilled with concrete block. I don't know the situation of the neighbor, but those would not be adequate, to meet the new codes, because you're going up and, adding weight and everything else to that. So, but, if there's a question, if it's on a good footing, concrete blocks on a good footing, there's no reason why you can't elevate several feet, if you did decide to do that. Yeah, so let me ask you a question. Is the top of your first floor below base flood, or do you know?
I don't know.
Your neighbor got an elevation certificate?
I just talked to him one time. He doesn't live there. He rents.
All right. If you take a look at elevation certificates, we have them on file at Town Hall in your vicinity, in your neighborhood, you can get a pretty good idea where you're at, and you may be okay with the top of your first floor, which would mean, you'd have to fill your basement and up to grade and put in some flood openings and make sure your appliances are up.
Why can't you take a,
If you have a basement, you have to pay more. And what if you have a basement, I've got a great basement and it's fine and everything, and I have 4 things down there that I care about. 2 of them are rented from the gas company, my water heater and my furnace, and they're on cinder blocks. And the other 2 things are my washer and dryer, which I really, after losing my last washer in 5 years, that's disposable too. So I have 4 things down there. Why do I want to insure my basement?
The question is, why do the insurance companies make you insure your basement? But the answer to that question is, the insurance rates are based on the elevation of your first floor. If you have a basement, frankly, you could move all of your appliances upstairs. Your first floor is considered your basement floor. And once again, definition of a basement is below grade on all 4 sides. If you have a walkout, it's not a basement by definition. But if it's surrounded by grade on all 4 sides, that's a basement. The only remedy to that under the current definitions are to fill the basement and up to grade and put in 2 openings.
So you fill it in?
You'd have to fill it in, yes.
Wow.
Yep.
what constitutes a
Go ahead. Are you done, Judy?
Wow.
Go ahead.
You talked about a basement and being enclosed on all 4 sides. So I have a basement, but it's walkout.
I know your house.
Yeah,
It's a walkout basement.
I have a 6-inch
Yeah.
step down
Yeah.
to the door, and I just got reclassified from slab to basement because FEMA have a different definition of basement than you do, I believe.
Well, no, we have the same definition.
Well, so
You have a, I think we talked, is your garage below grade on all 4 sides?
I don't know.
We-
I mean, there's no step down, obviously, because you couldn't drive in.
I probably should go take a look at it at some point. Why don't you contact my office and I'll take a look.
I need to come and talk to you anyway.
Yeah.
But clearly, in the last FEMA meeting in Marshfield, they mentioned that. They said, if there's any step down into your basement, into your slab, it's a basement. And I said, is there any limit to the size of the step? And they said, no, if there's a step down, it's a basement. I've got a 6-inch step, and they just reclassified.
That's not an official interpretation from FEMA, correct? That's just one person.
Can you repeat that? I don't think everybody could hear that.
Okay. Okay?
Yeah.
So contact my office. Any more questions? Rosemary?
I don't have a question, I have a comment, which I've been debating about.
You want?
I've been
Mike?
Googling right and left, and I can't remember
Rosemary.
exactly. And so I've been Googling right and left, as many of us have. And one of the things I came up with on 2 different occasions was, it'd be very interesting for you to do the same and find out who the lobbyists were who pushed the Bigger Waters Act. Insurers are one, environmental groups. And if, we can be supportive of that, but clearly there has to be some intention to just drive you out. I'm not sure what other conclusion you can come to for some of it. And I can't remember some of the others, but it was very interesting to see who was lobbying so hard for the Bigot Waters Act as it stands now.
Before we take more questions, I think everybody would like to really thank the townspeople for coming out and asking a lot of good questions tonight. And I'd really like to thank the Community Rating System Committee, Doris and David and Rosemary, Michael, and there's time for a few more questions of the town hall people. If you have anything related to elevation of the homes, structural things, or Board of Health things for these people, and then maybe we'll be able to take a couple of minutes to answer a few more questions. Representative Cantwell's going to be around for a few minutes to answer some questions. So.